Eric Garcetti, in addition to being the mayor of Los Angeles, is the first vice chair of the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority. His Back to Basics agenda is focused on job creation and solving everyday problems for LA residents. Eric was elected 4 times by his peers to serve as president of the Los Angeles City Council from 2006 to 2012. From 2001 until taking office as mayor, he served as the council member from the 13th District, which includes Hollywood, Echo Park, Silver Lake, and Atwater Village, all of which were dramatically revitalized under Mayor Garcetti's leadership. A recent editorial in the Los Angeles Times was titled, "LA County Residents Need Alternatives to Sitting in Soul-Crushing Traffic." And let me tell you, as someone who lives in Costa Mesa and works in Century City, I can personally attest to the soul-crushing aspect of the 405. Metro is responding to this challenge with Measure M, which you've heard a little about this morning and you will hear more about this afternoon, one of the largest and most comprehensive transportation plans of our time. We're going to hear about how LA will ease congestion with Measure M, create jobs, and improve quality of life, not only for Los Angeles, but for all of Southern California. So, with that, would you help me welcome the 42nd mayor of the city of Los Angeles and the first vice chair of Metro, the Honorable Eric Garcetti.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much, and a good afternoon, everybody. It is wonderful to be here with my friends, fellow elected officials, transit geeks everywhere, nasty women, bad hombres, the whole mix we got here today. It is a great joy to be here, and thank you to everybody for inviting me back to be at what is the most extraordinary gathering of leaders in the Southland. Because we all know that transportation isn't some peripheral issue area. It is actually the lens through which we see our lives, the way that we can spend time with our families, the economic competitiveness of our cities and counties and our region. It is the housing challenges we face. It is the environmental mandates that we have before us. It is, in so many ways, really that prism through which the light of Southern California is refracted. And when we do transportation right, we make life better here. And I think that's always an important place for us to remember how we speak about transportation, because if we only have these conversations in the closed rooms where those of us who actually enjoy transportation policy meet, we need to be able to speak plain English to the people who we represent, who want to be able to make it on time to that date where they might fall in love with somebody, spend the rest of their life together, or might want to get to that sports game like the Sparks played in Minneapolis, but they won a championship yesterday, which was great. Working on the Dodgers still, but keep on hoping there. They want to be able to go to that job interview for a dream job, or even take that job when it's offered because they can now make that commute. And once we rehumanize what it is that we're talking about, I think that people will be willing to be our partners. And this is an incredible time for public transportation and transportation in general in Southern California. If you look right now in San Diego County, in Ventura County, in Los Angeles County, I've been telling everybody, no matter where you live, start at the back of the ballot. You probably know who you're going to vote for at the front, but the things that affect your lives the most in every day start at the back of the ballot. The initiatives to improve our cities and our counties together. And I hope all of us are celebrating November 8th because voters approved our traffic relief and transportation infrastructure measures throughout the Southland. At the turn of the last century, we set the standard when it came to urban and suburban streetcar lines. In the middle of the 20th century, we innovated again by leading the way with an incredible freeway system as this country built out that high-tech innovation of its day. And now, if we pass these measures, we can lead in the 21st century. I was just with a member of Congress in my office who visited me in City Hall, Earl Blumenauer. Many of you may know him. He's worked a lot in transportation and active transportation. He's the congressman from Oregon who always has the bike pin on his lapel. And he said there are 24 measures in the country right now at the local level to improve transportation. And he said it's a time of a new federalism, where no matter what your politics are, you come to realize you can't go to Washington, D.C. anymore with an empty hat in hand and hope that you come back with a filled hat. But if you do come with a hat that is half filled, you can actually leave from Washington, D.C. with the hat filled all the way to the top. That in this day and age of fewer dollars, there is still an enthusiasm, bipartisan enthusiasm in Washington, D.C., to be able to help localities who are helping themselves. And given the scope of what we face, our traffic crisis, our economic opportunities, our environmental mandates, we must lead the way, because the alternative is simply unacceptable. We cannot have permanent gridlock. We cannot have an economy that slows to a crawl. And this isn't just a local or regional or even national issue. It's an international issue. Here in the Southland, where half of the goods that come into this country come through from the sea, our ports, and need to move on to those places where we stage those goods and move those goods to the country. This is an American issue that happens to be in Southern California. When we look at this creative crossroads of Southern California, which I think can lay claim to being the northern capital of Latin America and the western capital of the United States and the eastern capital of the Pacific Rim, when our airports, who bring in right now just LAX, one of many airports, and we're excited about what's happening in Ontario next month as we return Ontario to the Inland Empire ownership, the improvements that Burbank, together with Glendale and Pasadena, are making, the Bob Hope airports, the ongoing work that we have in all of our air travel. Let me just give you one statistic. LAX is now the #1 airport in the world of origination and destination. We're ranked 6th or 7th for overall traffic, but for at least for a mayor, the most important statistic is how many people get off those planes and go into your city. Those other 6 ahead of us, it's only because of their hub traffic when people fly through only the airport. But we're now the busiest airport that people actually get on the planes and get off the planes in the world. So this isn't just a local issue, it is an international issue. In LA County, we're facing about 2.5 million people in coming years. And our residents already spend an average of 81 hours a year stuck in traffic. When people hear that, it always sounds low. That's 81 hours where you're not moving. That's not all the hours you're actually crawling in traffic. 81 hours where you literally are not moving. And an annual cost of about $1,700 per person, according to research out of Texas A&M. When you think about the millions of hours and the billions of dollars that we literally waste because we have not done our jobs, it is time for us to figure out a better way forward. We lose in Los Angeles County 622 million hours stuck in traffic every year at a total cost of $13.3 billion. Imagine putting that back into our economy. Imagine putting that time back into our lives, to tuck our children into bed, to be able to see our parents and grandparents, to be able to spend time in the places that we want to explore in Southern California. And the fact is, across Southern California, our future right now is on the line. And let's be blunt. As we know Washington, D.C. isn't going to save us, they can partner with us. And as much as we want Sacramento to act, and I hope that we can do that in a bipartisan way on a transportation session that seems to never end, and we want it to end with a good outcome, it's really going to be up to us to empower ourselves. When I took office as mayor of the city of Los Angeles, the expectation was that I would focus only on solutions inside my city limits. But I came to realize very quickly that I had a responsibility to all of you in Southern California. The doors that I could open up when I talked to a city manager in Norwalk said, well, nobody knows who we are when we go to Washington, D.C. and want to talk about the necessity of widening the I-5. Or when I sat down with my friends in Ontario who said, why is it that Los Angeles still owns this airport? We think we can run it better. It's those conversations where I came to realize we can look at each other not as adversaries, this zero-sum game of competing, hey, I got a company to move across one city border to the next, but the jobs didn't come to Southern California, they just stayed there. Or I'm going to seize my territory and try to claim that as my identity rather than a joint identity. I think we've really broken down those walls. Just in LA County alone, I meet quarterly. I've convened all 88 cities and our 5 supervisors who have the unincorporated areas every quarter to talk about those things that our citizens don't really care have borders between them. Because you work in one city and you live in another. You shop in another one, even across county lines. When we look at the work that we're doing now, for instance, in Measure M, moving one of our rail lines further east, the Gold Line, or affectionately known as the Brain Train because it goes from Caltech to Azusa Pacific, and soon we'll be getting to Claremont. Why should it stop right there in East Los Angeles County, where West San Bernardino residents, and they spend more time together than with members of their own or residents of their own counties at the opposite ends? So we're going to go through with a Gold Line Construction Authority all the way to Montclair, over the border, and hopefully get all the way to Ontario. Because for folks that live right there in Claremont, they'd much rather be able to have a good way to get to Ontario Airport than to try to slog all the way to LAX or to get over to Burbank. When we start thinking about ways that we can connect, whether it's the Green Line in LA County to get all the way to Metrolink so folks can come here to Anaheim, or the ways that we can begin to look at the modes that already do intersect between Ventura County and Los Angeles County through Metrolink, we begin to talk about people's lives instead of our own bureaucratic needs. And at the start of the campaign for our measure, which is Measure M, we talked about how this would be able to improve your life. In fact, our tagline, it will literally change your life. And when we talked to people in focus groups, what was interesting about it is they said, keep going further and keep going longer. Any of you who are elected officials know this is a highly unusual thing to actually poll people and they say, oh, you're only doing it for 30 years? And then we say, well, what if it's 40 years and your numbers go up? And they say, well, what if it was 50 years and the numbers go up? And then we said, well, what if it doesn't sunset? And it went up even higher. And when we talk to people as to why that was, because in our business, usually people trust us for a few years to try something, then show us that you're actually doing it. They said, we look at transportation the same way we would as education. It's not like we do a property tax for 20 years and then say, and then our kids can decide whether they want schools or not. People need transportation, and it is at our own peril that we don't plan that in a steady, permanent way. Because if you look up north, BART right now, which built a good public transportation system, is going to voters just to try to pass a two-thirds measure on maintenance. You look at Washington, D.C., which built a great transportation system as well, but people died on it in this past year, and lines were shut down because maintenance isn't politically popular to fund. Building things is great. You get all the glory, you get all the plaudits, but actually doing the responsible thing of making sure that our children and our children's children will have a great, clean, and functioning system, that's a little bit tougher. But we're also looking at these initiatives not just as transportation. In fact, one of the greatest refractions of this prism is what it will do for our economy. I was up in Palmdale just a few days ago in a great old aircraft hangar next to a NASA hangar. It's right up there where the B-2 bomber was built and tested. It's where some of the greatest innovations in aerospace that this nation and this world's ever seen were. And Los Angeles City owns some land up there. And Kinky Shario, which is the company that won the bid to build our rail cars, is up there. They hope to provide 200 jobs, and they have over 350 jobs. And I talked to those workers who a generation ago probably would have been working in aerospace, would have gotten that $50 an hour job that allows them to support a family and have a middle-class dream come true. And they said, this is the new aerospace job. And if Southern California will invest, companies will come here not just to build out San Diego and Orange County and San Bernardino and Riverside and Los Angeles and Ventura's transportation needs. They will build that for the country out of Southern California. It will become one of our greatest exports to have those companies that build electric buses, that build rail cars, that provide the next century's infrastructure needs right here out of Southern California. And so we look at this as jobs as well. In fact, Measure M, our measure, will produce, according to the Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation, Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, a nonprofit, 465,000 jobs. And these are recession-proof, because sometime in our lifetime there will be another recession. But if we have this sort of investment there, you keep people employed, you keep them moving forward, and you keep our economy recycling those dollars on our main streets. Measure M is really looking in our county to ensure that the rest of the Southland is plugged in to each other and vice versa, from Camarillo to Canoga Park, from Palm Springs to Palmdale, from Newport Beach to Venice Beach. And here's the thing, we all want this. We all know what it will do. We know it can reduce our congestion by 15% versus what it will be, and that's just congestion. That says nothing about our commutes, and those are highly conservative numbers on the slowest train. We know the innovation that is bringing to public transportation, and I want to thank my fellow board members, including the chair of our Metro Board, John Fasana, who is here, Phil Washington, our CEO, Because what's happening is we are becoming a public-private partnership capital here in Southern California that I hope we will all be a part of moving forward too. Phil, Washington and Denver, we're a more capitalist country than places like Canada or Western Europe, and yet somehow those places, which are more socialist on the political spectrum, use public-private partnerships all the time for their infrastructure. And we've not been able to crack that nut, besides for some toll roads and one bad meter deal in Chicago. Nobody has been able to figure out how to do that. But in Denver, what was it, 11 years early, you said? 11 years early and maybe 70% the cost. They now have a train that goes to their planes, like we're building at LAX, something that was done in a way that took advantage of the private sector's ingenuity and competition, let them put all the R&D up front before they bid. And instead of saying, we know the only way to solve this problem and we're going to figure it out, now you bid on it and people pay sometimes 25 or 50% more because it's not their ideas, we're letting people say, no, we want to get from here to there. You tell us how you would do that. And when you have 3 or 4 or 5 companies competing, you get the best idea. And it's almost like the X Prize. People pay for that ingenuity up front. And so as we look at that, we're already in Los Angeles, even before Measure M passes, getting unsolicited bids coming forward for our Office of Extraordinary Innovation that allows us to have the private sector help us fulfill public needs. And for anybody who fears that this is somehow taking away the public oversight, nothing could be further from the truth. We will still own the real estate and the land. We will still make sure that we have good middle-class public jobs for the transportation network. But people want things to get done more quickly. And at this moment in time, when money is so cheap, I urge you all, whether it's your city, your county, or even if we look at regional initiatives, and certainly at the state level, now is the time to strike, to ask voters. When money is this cheap, you can bond and you could advance this money now at a rate that is much less than what construction inflation will be for the next 30 or 40 years. Money isn't free, but it's essentially free. And you give 2, 3, 5% return to infrastructure dollars that are waiting to land someplace. Don't let those go to some other part of the country. Let them come here to Southern California. Measure M will do so much. I don't want to detail everything in it. It has 10 different light rail lines that will be finished or begun and finished. We have multiple busways, BRTs, that will build on the success in the San Fernando Valley of the most successful now bus rapid transit line in the country, the Orange Line. It'll fix our freeways. It gives local return for our municipalities to make those decisions on intersections and streets that need to be paved and stop signs and stoplights that need to be improved. It really also looks forward to the future and technology as we look at autonomous vehicles, and maybe want our BRT lanes to also be autonomous vehicle lanes, or we want to look at making sure that we have that connectivity at our metro stops to car share and to bike share, the active transportation links that we all want to see and protected bikeways. 1,000 bikes were just put downtown Los Angeles, and we're rolling them out in Venice. Santa Monica just did the same. We're going to have about 5 different neighborhoods in the coming year that will see that. There's a revolution underway, but the way that we approach it is by making sure that we don't have a one-size-fits-all attitude. One person may take public transportation once a month. Another person may depend on it every single day. Some people love bikes, some people hate them. Some people will never get out of their car, but they are excited that somebody in front of them is going to get out of their car. And so when you look at how you communicate this to everybody, you have to figure out what works for all of us. I think people also understood, as we looked at this, that our financial modeling showed that we can build projects faster and cheaper if we have a consistent and predictable stream of funds. So much that we do in government, and particularly in transportation, is feast and famine. And so no wonder people sometimes say, we don't trust you. Each time we hear it's going to continue and get the job done, but you never have enough money to finish the job. I mentioned what's happening in Bay Area and Washington, D.C., but we need to build systems that actually last. You know, that old X up over here, here's the construction, and the maintenance is almost zero when you start, and eventually when you finish the construction, your maintenance costs replace that. It's time for us to be able to do that, and to look at a way that we can look our voters straight in the eye and say, don't worry, you have yourselves covered by what you voted on. We have something that will consistently last even long after we're gone to make sure that our public transportation and our transportation system is second to none. And, you know, the last thing I wanted to tell you is I think in all of this work that we do, we need to make sure that we're stealing the best ideas from each other. We're not saying Los Angeles has all the answers. In fact, we want to partner with Orange County on the next phase, and San Bernardino and Ventura, and each one of those counties that touches us, and even those ones that are further away. As we look at our state transportation system, we've got to be on the same page. Southern California always gets its lunch eaten by Northern California. The Southern California region is a donor region traditionally to the federal government. But something's changing when we do work together. We have a great graphic over at Metro that showed, the United States of America and per capita dollars from the federal funding for transportation. It used to be a big bubble around Boston, and a big bubble around Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia, and we had a small pebble here in Southern California. Well, that switched. The big balloon is now over here. And I get calls from our transportation secretary and other officials who say, by the way, we've got this funding source. You guys are the only people with money. We can't guarantee, but you should apply for that. And already we've got $3.3 billion, just while I've been mayor in 3 years, from those federal grants and loans that help us accelerate the work that we're doing. So Washington, D.C., while it's a difficult place to do business, is still a place eager to do business, even with the constraints that it has. And they will do business with a region that comes together. When I bring this down to the people, I want to end with a story. Kristen Spiato is a woman that I told the story of at my State of the City address this year. She lives in Ontario, and she works in a high-tech company in downtown Los Angeles. This is a job that she said she wouldn't have been able to take if we hadn't had the Gold Line. She drives from Ontario to the Gold Line, takes the Gold Line in. And she said that drive, if it was just a drive by itself, would have taken too much time away from my family. She said, I'm a new mother. She just gave birth to her first child. Now she uses public transit, a combination of public transit and driving, gets 2.5 hours back each week to spend with her 1-year-old son. That's what is at stake. That's what this is about. Ladies and gentlemen, all of you in this room working together have gotten us this far. Can you think of another region across such complicated political lines that would bring this many people together in a room like this today? That's exceptional. It should be embraced. It should be the model. We have made government probably as complicated in Southern California as anywhere in America. In my county alone, 88 cities, 20-something levels of government. If you have a mosquito problem, that's a different government than an air problem, than a water problem, than a transportation problem, than a health problem, than a police problem. We haven't actually made it very logical, but what can break that down is us, the human element. The ability for us to be able to say, at the end of the day, transportation is not about the billions of dollars. It's not even about the great number of lines that you built and you can leave behind. It's not the number of stations that you have. It's not the number of lanes in a freeway. It's about the number of hours you get back to do the things that make life worth living. And I think at the end of our days, we look back on 2 things in our time on Earth. Who did we know, and what did we do? I've been honored to know so many of you in this room, and I hope that you're honored to know each other, to call this place home, a place that the most improbable collisions of humanity occur, a place where cultures collide to come up with things like Korean short rib tacos and trucks that land on your block, things that seem almost impossible happen every single day predictably here. But secondly, what did we do? Let us say that we were the generation of builders, that just like those at those inflection points in our history, in the early part of the 20th century, in the post-war era, and now I believe in this decade of the 2010s, built again great cities and a great region for all. Thank you so much.